Production funding is brought to you in part by A. Reddix & Associates, a healthcare management consulting firm bridging the gap between healthcare policy and the community through education, training, and outreach. Find out more at ardx.net. Discussing the issues and celebrating the successes of the African American community. This is Another View.
Hello everyone, I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Welcome to Another View. Tonight, some sobering statistics. According to the Department of Justice, 1 in 3 African American women will experience domestic violence in a lifetime. FBI stats indicate that 28% of women who are killed during a DV event are African American. Domestic violence affects everyone, but issues of race and culture prevent many African American female and male victims from seeking help. Joining us to talk about the ramifications of domestic violence are Grace Orcini, DV educator and board member with Samaritan House in Virginia Beach, and Fran Dillard-Moore, director of the Women in Crisis Shelter and Prevention at the YWCA of Hampton Roads. Welcome to the program, ladies. How are you?
We're fine, thank you.
Grace, I'm going to start with you. Give me the definition of domestic violence so that people really understand what we're talking about.
Domestic violence is when one individual exercises power and control and tries to manipulate another person through issues of isolation, issues of who they could see, who they can't see. They will abuse a person emotionally and or physically if you've been physically abused, being a push and a shove all the way up to something very serious, more serious. You've also been emotionally abused. And normally and usually the emotional abuse starts first.
Fran, emotional abuse, give me an example.
It could just be put downs, name calling, playing with people's emotions like I mentioned, telling that person that they're not worthy of anything, you know, put downs that will really tear at somebody's self-esteem, making that person sometimes playing mind games, making them feel crazy, you know, it's your fault. You know, you need to respond in a certain way, you need to act a certain way, and making that person just pretty much feel crazy.
So it's really all about control.
It is.
And this is not just adults, or you don't have to be married to be in a domestic violence situation.
Exactly. The key words are intimate partner relationship. Somebody that you're going with, somebody you're dating with. You don't have to be married. Years ago, when I first started in the battered women's movement, it was mostly, you know, we were in our little closed box. It was mostly married people. Then we realized this is not where it was just at. So, but one of the things I wanted to piggyback on what Fran said on the types of emotional abuse, I want people to realize it starts slowly. Rarely does it start in one date or one encounter. It's something that a batterer, a perpetrator, knows how to manipulate over a period of time. So nobody in their right mind, let's say a woman would go out with someone on a date, right? And the first night somebody's abusing you and putting you down and calling you stupid and all sorts of names. Right. We wouldn't go on a second date.
So they kind of ease into it.
They ease into it, and then when they got you,
yes,
emotionally they got you.
You know, we have a film, and it's called Cycle, and it's produced and directed by Indio Sedano, and he's a man who actually experienced domestic violence himself. I'll talk about his story on the other side, but I want to take a look at this clip and then have you all react to it right after that. Let's take a look.
But you ever make my friends feel like they can't be in my damn house? I pay the bills around here, not you. You understand me? What did you say? You know what? Ever did you say my house? You understand me? Ever? I'm the man around here, not you.
Now, that showed many different, that was emotional, that was physical, the kids were involved.
Exactly.
It affects the entire family, does it not, Fran?
Yes, it does. And basically what he was saying, I'm the breadwinner. I'm the king of the castle. You know, I'm the person that should be the one who you need to respect. So it's almost like male privilege. And you see a lot of that. That's one of those tactics that batterer will use, or that's one of those dynamics that they use to fuel their ability to exert power over someone. So they have this belief that, you know, I'm the breadwinner, I'm the person bringing home the money, so I'm the caretaker. So because of that, you know, they want a level of respect in their home, you know. And when I say a level of respect, any person that is basically not pretty much a person that's making their own decisions, or a person, and the word that I want to say, in domestic violence situations, a lot of the women feel that they're not allowed to voice their concerns, or they're not allowed to express themselves.
Just as she didn't
Yes,
in that film.
she
never
didn't
said
say
a word.
she was afraid.
She
was afraid to.
Yes.
Because, you know, from the film, and Fran and I, both our experiences, this is probably not the first time he's hit her. I've worked with batterers also. That's something I do through another agency, people that perpetrate. And a batterer will say to me, I don't have to hit but once or twice really good, because I said, oh yes, and now your belief is what? Well, because I have instilled fear. They may not use those exact words, those are my words, but they instill the fear, and then the third and fourth time, all they have to do is give the look.
Yeah, the intimidation.
Or the intimidation piece.
That's what, now, Indio, who made the film, says that I witnessed physical and verbal abuse as a young boy, not realizing the impact it had on me. He said, I harbored anger inside that ultimately broke through as a teenager. When I was 17, I slapped my high school girlfriend. Till this day, I remember that night as if it happened yesterday. My wife and I never argued until after the first few years of marriage. Although I did not physically beat my wife, I would grab her and hold her. Therefore, it escalated. I verbally and eventually emotionally abused her, which we all know is just as bad or even worse in many cases, because the emotional scars never go away.
Right.
So as children who observe domestic violence, tend to become
males. Generally the males will be the perpetrators, and the females will start to minimize the threat of fear and think it's normal. So then you have young girls who become the victims in relationships. I mean, domestic violence, we know, is it's intergenerational. And they also are calling it intra-family violence, where we're seeing, you know, it's passed down from one family to another. I just had a woman on Saturday she called it the family curse. We all knew what the family curse was. It happened in our family. It happened among our siblings.
To the grandmother,
the aunts, the uncles. So, you know, if you're around all of this, you start to minimize and you start to normalize the situation. Maybe this is just how relationships, our families show their love, and it'll get better. And generally too, there's a cycle. There's a cycle of violence, just like what Grace was saying, that it doesn't happen right away. It's a gradual process. And we also have to remember that generally there are stages where the violence will escalate. And so that person may not always be abusive. At some point, the husband in that situation, or a husband, might be remorseful. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen again. Start to welcome.
And then you want to take them back and embrace that.
And that's the most dangerous stage. Dr. Leonore Walker, whose research has been highly criticized now, which I sort of give her credit, because she came up with a cycle of violence, and she puts out there that during that honeymoon phase, when things are really nice, that really is the most dangerous part, because that's when we would say, oh well, he or she, you know, is really trying to change. They're really sorry. They're remorse, and it starts feeling like it used to feel, like when everything was really good. So then you give up this thought of, well, maybe I should be getting out of here. Maybe I should be looking outside of this relationship for help. You give that up because things are back to what they were.
Let me ask this question. If you get hit once, should you automatically assume then that this person is a batterer and make that plan to
that's
to
so
leave?
Controversial.
because I mean, there a lot of people will say, well, you know, he slapped me, but I provoked him. So.
Well, let me address that. In my experience, I've been doing this work since the late 1960s, early 70s. I will tell you that 99.8% that if they hit you once, that somewhere along the way they are going to hit you again. And it is abuse, and it is against the law, and ergo, therefore, I would say battery. Now, a lot of people, we love to categorize in this country, so maybe we don't have to categorize so fast, but there is abuse. If it's done once, it could happen. It could easily happen again. And the provoking thing, I can use an example on the Mel Gibson thing that's up in the air now. When one of the doctors on one of the main talk shows in the morning came out, the first thing out of her mouth was, well, she provoked him. See how she provoked him? I heard that. And I could just feel the heat in my body coming up and going, I don't think so. No, actually, we don't provoke. I'm not saying that everything, if I were in a relationship, that I say or do is right.
But nothing should provoke you.
Somebody to lose that kind of control, to come after you. That's the person who has lost the control is the person who's going to be arrested.
Now, both of you work with shelters that provide a safe haven for women and men, who have been battered. And we want to make it clear that men also can be victims,
absolutely,
of domestic violence. Yes. But you both work with shelters. Give us a sense of if a woman or a man leaves that bad situation and comes to you, what kinds of services or what do they expect to happen?
You want to go first?
You want to start?
Basically, one of the first things that we try to do is we do a safety plan, because we have to realize that a woman or a person who leaves stands a greater risk of serious injury or death when she leaves.
Okay, and we can talk about women because it is predominantly.
Yes, exactly. And we don't want to take away the fact that 90% or even more than that, you know, the domestic violence and the violence that we see is when the women are being victimized. So for that purpose, when the women...
And when you say a safety plan, is this to keep the person who is battering from finding them?
That's part of it, yes. Okay. And then there are other things too, such as a protective order. But the initial thing we need to do is assess and do also called a lethality assessment. We need to assess her level of threat, you know, and let her explain to us, you know, if there are weapons in the house, or do he have access to weapons? Because we find out that, especially in the African American community, that is one of those precipitating factors that can really lead to having access to a weapon can lead to a woman's death. So that would put her on a very high rating on our scale. So we would have to do an assessment, and then a safety plan could be something that we would sit down and talk about when you're at your place of work, when you're picking your children up from school.
I hadn't thought about
things that you need to do, because you know, when women come into the shelter, and many times with their children, it's great that the McKinney-Vento has provided funding so that those children can come into shelter and they can easily access shelter in other areas, you know. But sometimes women don't want to disrupt their children from school. So their children may still stay in the same school where the perpetrator may have access to them.
I see.
So it's having a plan, letting the school officials know what's going on. When the children are participating in extracurricular activities, letting the coaches, letting family members, and letting folks know if he comes up, if he shows up, this is what we need to do. A safety plan could be for women who we know are returning. And many women do return home. They return to their batterers.
A lot of people don't understand that. Why is that, Grace?
Why do they return?
Yes.
Well, it's not just one reason. The biggest reason, believe it or not, is out of fear, because as Fran had said, sometimes it is more treacherous, it is far more serious to leave than to stay. When you leave, this is where you're putting yourself right out there. You're trusting the protective order, you're trusting all these variables. This is the most dangerous time. Now, women do stay, and some men that we have in our shelters, for a variety of reasons. It could be cultural reasons, it could be religious reasons. Economics is the biggest. It's not that somebody wants to stay in their good home or go to a better home or anything like that. It is they're going to be thrown into poverty level. One thing that abusers do really well is to put them down in an economic situation at a poverty level. In other words, they place them in a way.
They take over the checkbook, they take over the finances.
They take over everything. Some people are prisoners in their own home. They take the driver's licenses away, the telephones away. You can't work outside the home. You have to be here.
We
They're
have
like prisoners. And so
we have a stat that says among African American women killed by their partner, almost half were killed while in the process of leaving the relationship.
Yes.
So that really
Yes.
is a dangerous.
Yes, and having a weapon
time.
in the home, as
Yes.
Brandon said, is huge. At Samaritan House, very similar. Developing a safety plan and finding out if a prospective client is safe on that hotline, because they run a crisis hotline also. The safety is paramount. Are you safe at this moment? Do I have to call the police now? Can you get out of the house now? That kind of thing. Safety is generic, but everybody's safety plan is different according to their home of origin,
situation.
to their situation. Some may have children, some may not have children.
How do you get past the shame of the abuse so that you will leave? I would imagine that might be a big issue also,
Yes,
Fran.
it's very difficult. I mean, you have to take in consideration the level of emotional abuse. So we have women who really feel responsible. They think that
it's their fault.
It's their fault. You know, it's unlikely that you have batterers that are really accountable for their actions. Most of the time they're blaming you. See, you know how I get when, when I come home and you do this. If you only did such and such right. It gets to the point where sometimes even the children will start saying, Mommy, you have to do this right or else Daddy's going to get angry, which goes back to reasons why women sometimes return is because of the children. The children don't understand. The children sometimes feel responsible. They feel a lot of guilt, and the mothers just feel, I can't take this any longer. My children need a stable household. And when I say stable, they're thinking because there's a roof over my children's head. That's stability. So some women will tolerate abuse, tolerate the put downs because of the children. Because when they've been in economic situations or situations where all this has been taken away from them, they have very low job skills. Many of them have very low job skills. They don't have the education that some other people will have where they can have the resources, and that's a big part. The more education you have, the more money, the more power, the more resources. So when you strip all that away from someone, it's very difficult for them, and that's what batterers do.
Right.
They strip it all away from you.
And that would be a good lead-in, because the society strips them away too.
Of course.
We hold the responsibility. We hold a lot of judgment as a community, and I think you know this, that through the years, women shouldn't do this, women shouldn't do that, women deserve this. If you dress this way, okay, it's okay that you got sexually assaulted because look how she dresses. The blame is always put on the victim, the survivor, and our community needs to hold some responsibility for that.
Yes.
We need, as we were talking, education is the key to prevention here. It's the key to understanding. There's so much we don't understand because we live in our own little worlds. It's like Fran and I were talking before the program about, I was saying, I do want to talk a little bit about white privilege. As a white woman, I had to be taught. I wasn't aware of what white privilege meant when I walked into a place or whatever I did because of the color of my skin. I thought I was getting entry just because of who I was, but that wasn't the case. But I had to be taught that. I had to be shown that in a respectful way.
And a lot of times, in terms of African Americans, the idea of turning in yet another black man for doing something like this,
absolutely. It is a problem.
And the huge level of mistrust that they have to access those services. If I go down to the Department of Human Services or wherever they go, will my children be taken away from me? Because quite often many women are looked upon, their children are removed, and they're looked upon as failure to protect. You're failing to protect your children when you have your children exposed to households where there's violence, So they are very hesitant. They're hesitant about accessing the criminal justice system because we know there's a disproportionate number of African American males that are incarcerated. So they're also hesitant to go down and they're hesitant to call the police, law enforcement. They think that they're
not even sure that law enforcement is going to protect them.
They're not sure that they're going to protect them, or are they going to brutalize my husband or my boyfriend in the process, or will I just be another person that's and you said the word so fluidly when we were talking earlier, when you were saying, am I selling out my own spouse or my own partner, and getting them involved in the system? So there are so many reasons why women have that mistrust, and then they go there in places and they're re-victimized.
We've got less than a minute left, and I want to put up the Virginia Domestic Violence Hotline, and that number is 1-800-838 1-800-8238, 1-800-838-8238. If they call that number, they will be directed to a shelter or
in the area that they live
in the area that they live.
Yes,
and that's really, really important for you to do that. In 10 seconds each, ladies, tell women what you would want them to know so that they will take some action.
I would want you to know that if you have that pit in your stomach that you're feeling that something is not right, please pay attention to it if it's in that relationship. It's worth listening to.
And I would tell them it's not your fault. I mean, you deserve better. You know, you're a person that deserves a life free of violence.
Thank you so much. There's so much we could talk about.
I know.
And I know we just scratched the surface, but I really appreciate this.
Thank you, Barbara.
And I appreciate you being on. And when we come back, a conversation with Peninsula native turned NFL coach Mike Tomlin. But first, here's what's happening in Hampton Roads. He's the youngest head coach in NFL history to coach and win a Super Bowl, and he's from right here in Hampton Roads. I'm talking about Pittsburgh Steelers coach Mike Tomlin. The Peninsula native recently returned to the area to host a free youth football camp, and our Lisa Godley had the opportunity to talk to him about life both on and off the field.
There's a reason Mike Tomlin returns home year after year after year. Not only is the Peninsula the place where many of his family members still live, but it's the place where he first learned to love the game of football.
It's made me who I am today. It's a great place to be. It's a great place to be from.
And he participates in this annual youth football weekend because he simply wants to pay it forward. Mike Tomlin says it was the impact his coaches had on him while he was playing football as a young man here at Hampton Roads that inspired him to come back and do the same.
I just had such a great respect for the coaches that I had as a young man coming up, the Little League coaches, the high school and junior high coaches. They were the blueprint for being men, if you will, for us, or the right kind of men, the men that we wanted to be. I just wanted to be like those guys.
So what is it that Mike Tomlin hopes the 200-plus campers attending the free Peninsula All-Star football camps will take away with them? Hopefully,
I cultivate the relationship that they have with this game. That's what was done for me. I love football. I loved it then. They taught me how to respect it. They taught me how to work. They taught me how to use that love for the game to better myself. Hopefully, I'm providing the same opportunities for the next generation.
After Little League, Tomlin played for Denby High School and then at the College of William and Mary before graduating and going on to coach on the collegiate level. He remembers his time here fondly.
It's a great place to be from. It's a tough place. It teaches tough life lessons. That's okay. It's about sharpening that sword because the battle of life is waiting on all of us.
After spending 5 years coaching college ball, Tomlin took a job coaching professional football in 2001. He'd spend the next 4 years coaching defensive backs for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers before taking a job as the defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. Then came his first head coaching position with the Pittsburgh Steelers. When asked about the large number of professional athletes getting in trouble off the field, Tomlin says his organization is committed to helping these young people grow.
They are the sports stars that they are. People at times forget that they're 20-something-year-old people and what comes with that. People make mistakes when they're in their 20s. These people happen to make mistakes because they have a great deal of money and the fame that comes with it. So it makes it doubly important that they make good choices because their actions are kind of inspirations for the next generation.
His advice to others interested in playing professional sports: make sure your actions match your words.
People talk too much sometimes. and spend a lot of time talking about what it is they desire to be. You got to put plans into action. You got to make the daily commitment to take action, to make sure that you're doing the small steps that are going to put you in position to chase your goals, whatever your goals are.
It's a message he hopes the young men who attended the free football weekend will take with them, and one he plans on spreading year after year, giving him an opportunity to do two things he loves: coach football and return to Hampton Roads.
I love home. I'm a Newport News kid, Hampton kid, 757 kid. It's made me who I am today. It's a great place to be. It's a great place to be from. It'll always be dear to me. I'll always come back.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
Before we leave you this evening, we want to pay tribute to Dr. Catherine Treherne, who passed away this week from lung cancer. Kathy was a friend of mine and a friend to many whose lives she touched. She was a dermatologist on the Board of Visitors for ODU and a trustee at Grace Episcopal Church. Her passion was helping youth. To the Treherne family, we send you condolences and love. Now, Kathy would be the first to say celebrate life. And in that vein, we'd also like to say congrats to Hampton Sheriff B.J. Roberts on being named president of the National Sheriff's Association. He is the first African American to hold the position in the 70-year existence of that nonprofit organization dedicated to raising the level of professionalism of those in the field of criminal justice. Way to go, Sheriff Roberts. And next week, vacation ideas featuring Black history right here in Hampton Roads. We'll see you next time for Another View.
Production funding is brought to you in part by A. Reddix & Associates, a healthcare management consulting firm bridging the gap between healthcare policy and the community through education, training, and outreach. Find out more at ardx.net.